6 suspected pirates are in custody tonight after they fire on a U.S. Navy warship off the Horn of Africa.
Pirates make around $100,000 on a capture. A lot of the pirates are young, most of the time between 15, 16, and 25.
The pirates didn't know what hit them. From a distance, it looked like a dream target. A lone vessel moving steadily through a strategic shipping lane just off the Horn of Africa. No visible escorts, no defensive maneuvers, just a slow-moving silhouette against the hazy dawn.
They said no, that their lives were in the hands of God. If they're going to reach shore, it was up to God.
The kind of ship that screams unarmed cargo, ripe for the taking. These pirates thought they had scored a jackpot. But what they had really done was make a fatal mistake, one that would go down as one of the most catastrophic blunders in modern maritime piracy. Because the ship they targeted wasn't a cargo vessel at all. It was a U.S. Navy warship, specifically a destroyer equipped with some of the most advanced tracking and weapon systems on Earth. And the moment those pirates made their move, they triggered a response so swift, so lethal, it left no doubt they had just messed with the wrong Navy. This is the story of what happens when modern-day pirates confuse prey with predator, and the brutal consequences that followed. It all started around 5:45 a.m. The skies were just starting to turn a pale blue as a skiff, one of the small, fast boats typically used by Somali pirates, crept within visual range of what they assumed was a lightly armed merchant vessel. These pirates weren't new to the game. They had dozens of successful hijackings under their belt. Their tactics were practiced, brutal, and efficient. Approach low and fast, launch grappling hooks, overwhelm the crew, then demand millions in ransom. But this time, things didn't go according to script. Inside the cargo ship, actually the USS Mason, an Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyer, crew members were already alert. The Navy had received intelligence about possible pirate activity in the region, and the vessel was operating under heightened security protocols. The radar picked up the fast-approaching blip almost immediately. At first, the bridge assumed it might be a fishing boat or a routine vessel. But the erratic pattern of movement, zigzagging, accelerating, then cutting the engine, set off red flags. Lookouts confirmed visual. A pirate skiff with armed men, RPGs visible, and grappling equipment on board. This wasn't just another close encounter. This was a hostile approach. The Navy responded instantly. Before the pirates even got within 1,000 meters, the USS Mason activated its long-range acoustic device, LRAD, blaring deafening warnings. The pirates, either undeterred or unable to understand what they were facing, pushed forward. That was their second mistake. The USS Mason launched flares and warning shots with its .50 caliber machine guns. The water exploded around the pirate skiff, but still they advanced, perhaps assuming the warnings were bluffs. Maybe they thought this was a foreign-flagged freighter with a few armed guards on board. What they didn't know was that they were within range of an entire arsenal of advanced naval firepower. At 500 meters, the U.S. Navy stopped playing nice. A 25mm chain gun mounted near the bow barked to life, sending a cascade of shells directly into the pirate boat. The impact was immediate, explosive. The skiff splintered, fire erupting from onboard fuel tanks. Some pirates dove into the water, others were thrown clear by the blast. A second pirate boat, not far behind, turned hard, trying to retreat. But the USS Mason's radar had already tagged it. This wasn't just about eliminating threats, it was about sending a message. The destroyer deployed its MH-60R Seahawk helicopter, which launched from the flight deck within minutes. From the air, the helicopter tracked the retreating skiff. relaying coordinates to the ship and warning nearby commercial vessels to steer clear. The pirates, now clearly panicked, tossed weapons into the sea and raised their hands in surrender. But surrender doesn't erase the fact that they attacked a U.S. Navy warship. The helicopter fired warning shots across the bow of the fleeing skiff, forcing it to stop. A U.S. Navy SEAL boarding team, part of a rapid response detachment on board the Mason, fast-roped down onto the second boat. The pirates were quickly subdued, zip-tied, and secured. The SEALs found more weapons, communication gear, and even rough maps of the shipping routes marked in pencil. Back aboard the USS Mason, the first skiff was now a wreck, burning, sinking, and surrounded by a slick of fuel. Search and rescue teams deployed fast response boats to pull surviving pirates from the water, while others monitored for any secondary attacks. The threat was neutralized, but the aftermath was just beginning. Military intelligence quickly pieced together what had gone wrong, at least for the pirates. Operating out of a small coastal village in Puntland, Somalia, the group had intercepted faulty intel about a high-value freighter transiting the area. They were told it was low security, hauling electronics and high-end cargo. But the coordinates had been botched, or worse, leaked intentionally as bait. Some analysts believe this was a sting operation in disguise, aimed at drawing out pirate cells using outdated smuggling intel. The captured pirates were detained aboard the Mason, interrogated, and later transferred to a military facility for prosecution. Meanwhile, Navy Command released footage of the encounter: flashing lights, booming machine gun fire, pirates leaping overboard, all broadcast across social media and news networks within hours. It was a show of strength and a stark warning to anyone thinking about similar attacks. And the message was clear: the age of modern piracy isn't over, but neither is American naval dominance. What made this incident particularly noteworthy was how efficiently it was handled. In under 20 minutes, a full-scale pirate attack was detected, intercepted, repelled, and neutralized without a single American injury. This was the culmination of years of investment in ship defense systems, threat recognition software, and rapid response teams. But there was something deeper at play here. The pirates weren't just attacking for profit. According to intercepted radio chatter and later interviews, they believed the cargo ship belonged to a U.S.-based defense contractor. Some even claimed they were striking back against what they saw as American influence in the region. In other words, it wasn't just a robbery, it was a statement. That's when the Pentagon elevated the incident from a mere piracy case to a potential terror-linked engagement. Naval forces were redirected to the region. Satellite surveillance over the Somali coast was increased. Intelligence agencies started cross-referencing names from the pirate crew with known militant affiliations. One of the pirates, in fact, was linked to an extremist group with ties to al-Shabaab. Suddenly, this wasn't just about protecting cargo lanes, it was about preempting a larger network of threats operating under the radar. Part 2 continues with the political fallout, the intelligence breakthroughs, and how this one failed hijacking reshaped U.S. naval policy in East Africa. As dawn broke over the horizon, the twisted metal remains of what had once been the pirates' skiffs floated aimlessly in the sea. Some debris sank slowly beneath the waves, while others burned quietly, reminders of a disastrous miscalculation. But the story was far from over. What came next would redefine the way both the pirates and the international community viewed maritime security. The U.S. Navy wasn't content to just defend. They were going to investigate. The USS Mason immediately dispatched a team of intelligence officers and forensic specialists via rigid-hull inflatable boats to search for survivors and gather evidence. The mission was twofold: recover any pirates still alive to gain valuable intel, and identify where the skiffs had originated from. They found one survivor, badly burned, in shock, and floating on debris. He was pulled from the water and rushed into the ship's medical bay. Under heavy sedation, and through the help of a translator, he eventually revealed what many suspected. The pirates were operating under the command of a local warlord with suspected ties to regional terror networks, including AQAP, Al-Qaeda, in the Arabian Peninsula. That admission caused immediate alarm in both military and intelligence circles. It wasn't just a case of opportunistic pirates targeting commercial ships anymore. This was an orchestrated attempt by a terror-linked militia to hijack a vessel that could serve a strategic purpose, either as a bargaining chip, propaganda tool, or even a mobile weapons platform. The implications were chilling. Within hours, U.S. Central Command activated its crisis response team. At CENTCOM headquarters in Tampa, Florida, analysts pored over satellite images, regional chatter, and drone footage to pinpoint the origin of the pirate fleet. Meanwhile, the Office of Naval Intelligence began coordinating with allied partners, including the British Royal Navy, the French Marine Nationale, and private shipping companies operating in the region. They learned something even more disturbing. The pirates weren't just acting on faulty intelligence, they had been fed that intelligence. A disinformation campaign had circulated across encrypted channels suggesting that a U.S. cargo vessel, loaded with humanitarian aid and minimal security, would be transiting the Bab el-Mandeb Strait on that very night. The target, in fact, was never real. It had been a trap. The United States, in cooperation with Saudi and Emirati intelligence, had launched a counterintelligence operation designed to bait maritime pirates into action. Over the past few months, attacks on commercial shipping had escalated to dangerous levels. The Pentagon had quietly grown tired of simply reacting to each incident. It was time to lure out the networks responsible. And they succeeded. The USS Mason had been deployed under the cover of a supply ship, broadcasting a false transponder ID and following a route known to be vulnerable. Every step of the pirates' approach had been tracked and logged. The minute they launched, drones in the sky and sonar operators on deck were watching. The Navy wasn't caught off guard. They had orchestrated the entire scenario. The brutal takedown wasn't just retaliation. It was the closing act of a months-long sting operation. News of the incident began to spread globally. At first, pirate attacks rarely made front-page headlines. But this was different. The scale, the deception, the overwhelming military response, it all made for a story the world couldn't ignore. International media outlets began calling it the Battle of the Strait. Photos leaked online showing the smoking remains of pirate skiffs, the USS Mason silhouetted against the orange glow of fire. Analysts on television debated the ethics of baiting pirate groups, while others applauded the ingenuity of the U.S. military. One headline read, "Pirates brought knives to a tomahawk fight." In Somalia, where many of these pirate operations originated, the news had a chilling effect. Recruitment into pirate militias dipped. Local warlords began denying involvement or association, fearful of targeted drone strikes or black ops raids. Even the promise of ransom money wasn't enough to motivate young men to sign up anymore, not after what happened in the Strait. The lone survivor from the attack was transferred to a classified detention facility where he was debriefed by U.S. intelligence for weeks. What he revealed helped map out an entire web of piracy and terrorism connections that had eluded authorities for years. Caches of weapons, smuggling routes, encrypted communication hubs, all uncovered from the testimony of one burned, broken man who had made the mistake of going to war with the U.S. Navy. At the Pentagon, the success of the sting emboldened senior brass. A new strategy was quietly drafted: Operation Iron Shield. The goal was simple: transform the Red Sea and Gulf of Aden into a no-go zone for pirates, arms smugglers, and militant groups. Surveillance was increased. Rules of engagement were loosened. Covert operations were greenlit. Allies in the region were quick to fall in line. Egypt increased patrols near the Suez Canal. The Saudis offered refueling stations and intelligence assets. The UAE sent guided missile corvettes to bolster multinational task forces. Even China, whose shipping lanes were also at risk, sent a naval detachment to conduct joint patrols. The psychological effect on pirate networks was immediate and devastating. They had once seen the sea as a highway of opportunity. Now it felt like a death trap. Leaders began splintering. Trust within their own ranks eroded. Some began to suspect infiltration by Western intelligence. A few even defected and provided intelligence in exchange for immunity. Meanwhile, the USS Mason and its crew returned to port as heroes. The sailors were awarded commendations, and the ship's commanding officer gave a televised interview, carefully avoiding operational specifics, but making one thing clear: anyone who comes for the U.S. Navy should bring more than speedboats and blind courage. The story became a case study at military academies. The Naval War College hosted panels discussing the strategic brilliance of turning misinformation into a weapon. Cyber warfare specialists analyzed how social engineering played a role in luring out the enemy. It was a masterclass in modern asymmetrical warfare. And yet, some questions remained. How deep did the connection between these pirates and terrorist groups go? Were they truly just pawns, or part of a much larger game being played by state actors? Intelligence agencies began to scrutinize Iranian and Qatari signals traffic. Russian paramilitary activity in East Africa was suddenly under the microscope. What had seemed like a simple pirate ambush now felt like the surface of something far more complex. In Congress, hearings were held behind closed doors. Lawmakers were briefed on the full scope of the operation and its implications. Funding for naval intelligence programs was quietly increased. One senator was overheard calling it the smartest military trap we've set since the Cold War. As for the pirates, they faded into obscurity, at least for a while. But the scars of the operation lingered. Local villages near the Somali coast mourned lost sons and brothers. Black market arms dealers went underground. Coastal warlords became more paranoid, unpredictable. But the world had changed. For years, pirates ruled stretches of ocean by exploiting a lack of will, coordination, and firepower among their targets. But after this operation, the sea no longer belonged to them. It belonged once again to the warships that sailed it, with silent, watching eyes and weapons systems that didn't miss. And so, the lesson was carved into the annals of naval warfare. Never mistake a U.S. warship for an easy target. You won't live long enough to make that mistake again.